Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Stoney.
Hello.
And Jason.
Hello, everyone.
How are you guys?
It's been a good week.
Yeah, interesting week for sure.
Yeah, I know. It's right now. It seemed like the every time you turn on the news or you just the presidential election seems to be just dominating everything on the airwaves now. So which is to be expected.
I was watching the LSU game the other night, and the first half was okay, but the second half, it seemed like every other commercial was something to do with the campaign.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I got sick. I would just hit the sound every time that went to commercial.
You know, politics has become religion, and that really segues into our topic.
I want to see. Did y'all hear what in the Kamala Harris speech she had the other night? Did you hear what happened?
Mm-mm.
She gets to her pro-choice area of her speech, and a gentleman in the background yelled out, "Jesus is Lord." And she said, "Excuse me, but you're at the wrong rally."
Uh-oh.
Well, I mean,
okay, that should be career-ending, campaign-ending. There shouldn't be a Christian on this planet, or especially in America, that would vote for that woman right now.
Well, but see, then that goes back to we're in a different world now. And there's a significant portion of people who have disaffiliated themselves with religion and whatever that might mean. And it's very interesting that some of the latest polls that have come out, I mean, this kind of brings me to a point that I remember. It was a big headline. It was probably about, a year ago. And Gallup had come out and said for the first time ever, Christianity was no longer the majority in the United States.
I don't know if it's there yet for even what I was looking for getting ready for this.
You know, it just kind of got me going. It's like, what is going on in our culture that so many people have dropped out of religion? And, we've all talked about various issues of what's going on in the United States and even in the world. We're not alone in this. Why are increasingly younger people, considering themselves the nuns, whereas in the past that wasn't the case? And so I thought it would be a very interesting topic to kind of talk about is kind of what's going on. And I think some of this kind of ties in a little bit into what we talked about last week.
Oh, absolutely does.
And the changing demographics, changing, the age groups of people that are coming of age and of exercising their political will and stuff like that. So I think we're going to have a really good discussion on this. I mean, I know, guys, there's a lot of information on this topic. I know when I was doing my research, there's a lot.
Well, I actually tried to tie that into last week's episode and my favorite saying of, hard times create strong men, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the hard times create strong men statement reflects how society cycles from phases of hardship and ease. And today's generations may be living in the weak men phase. And so weak men don't really look to religion. They don't look to those things because they're godlike. They believe in themselves. They've created their own idol in themselves, and money and other things other than God and religion and faith.
Well, I'm looking at this website here called Church Track. He said the state of church attendance, trends and statistics in 2024. And it's what percent of church members attend church regularly? And this is just some key statistics here. It said 20% of Americans attend church every week. 41% of Americans are monthly church attendance or more, and those are based both on Gallup polls. And then 57% of Americans seldom or never in a religious service attendance. Regular church attendance has steadily declined since the turn of the century. So what might be driving that? Why are people abandoning religion?
I know for myself, people in my age bracket, and I think even some younger people, I have a theory that I've heard other people kind of back up the same thing, is that people are what drive people out of church. Is that I've met more and more people in my journey through life that I think in some way believe there's a higher power, believe in God, or like the teachings of Jesus and all those sort of things. But the more and more you just kind of like, not dig or pry, but like you just start to have a conversation, the more the realization of like it's church people that have gotten people out of church. And the kind of the hypothetical, or I guess the idea that I have is that I think people can get behind the teachings of Jesus, but whenever they start to see that the people that are preaching those things don't live that way, there's a disconnect. And I think that I think the younger people as well, I think are aware of that, and I think can see that, and I think are intelligent enough to know that that's hypocritical. And then, I'm not blanketing any certain denomination. I'm not saying anything like that, but I think more and more people start to realize that people are just people, and that they're not practicing what they preach a lot of times, which is unfortunate. And then that's what I think drives people away from the church, is when they feel like that, you hold yourself to a certain standard, but you don't.
And I would agree that I do believe that people really place a lot of weight on what they perceive as hypocrisy.
Yeah.
But I've thought about this, and I'm sitting there going, well, when has ever church been about being that people are perfect?
In certain denominations, it is.
Well, and unfortunately, that's not how Christianity evolved from the very beginning. I believe that's more of a modern view of Christianity, and I would venture to say it goes back. If I remember reading something about this, if you remember, it kind of goes back to the time where communities basically would leave and say, well, we don't want to be affiliated with them because they're heathens or whatever the case may be, and they form their own little communities. Unfortunately, by doing that sets in motion certain things.
Right.
And oftentimes those groups eventually die out over time because you only have a certain percentage of people that really subscribe very faithfully, so to speak, to certain things. And I just think it kind of expires over time. But I think churches, of course, are made of people who are fallen. They're sinful. We can still use that term nowadays. But, it is always going back to what I've always said. I mean, it goes back the old Catholic term that is still used is concupiscence. It's why is it so easy to be bad and so hard to be good? Because naturally we are selfish people. I mean,
see that, and that's where I was fixing to go with it. If you look, maybe back in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, with some of the television and things that were coming out, and we started becoming a little bit more selfish in what we were doing. But really, from the advent of the internet, and like Ian said, 2005, 2008, with the smartphones and the cell phones and things like that, what's there? Social media. And to me, social media has taught us to compare instead of being grateful. And so we go into church pointing fingers and look at that person and look at this person, but look how good I am. I don't need to be here with those people. And so you build your own wall into the church, forgetting the fact that you're going to the church not just for yourself, but maybe, you got your hand out wanting this blessing or wanting this, but maybe you're supposed to be that blessing for somebody else who's in need of it. And instead of pointing fingers, why don't you help somebody?
And I think that all of these, these are all, specific contexts for probably specific people. So I'm not saying one's wrong or one's not.
Exactly.
But I feel that I came from a time in the late 90s, early 2000s of like big purity culture, where like that was a big movement, like having a purity ring and like being like holy in that kind of sense.
And there was another marriage that came out of that too in Louisiana. What was
I'm
it?
not sure.
There was some, if you got married this way, it was a little bit harder to get a divorce or something.
Oh, yeah. Like a covenant
marriage.
Yeah.
That's it. That kind of came out of that little era there too, didn't it?
Exactly. And there was like a lot of rules and a lot of things that I think were imposed upon young people. And I think that
you had to have counseling too, didn't you?
Yeah, and there was a lot of stuff that was involved in it, and more than anything else, there was a lot of shame involved. And that was the thing. That's what I'm talking about whenever I'm saying like the comparison. There is, at least in our context, there's a lot of people in my age bracket that I feel like have been shamed out of church. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of religious people that were like, you have to live your life this way. You cannot drink alcohol. You cannot say a curse word. You cannot have sex before marriage. And if you do that, it's like ultimate sin. And like you have to live your life in a certain way to be perfect to a certain amount, and then the second that you're not, that's where like the shame comes in of like I'm unworthy, which all of us are, and that's the whole point. That's where grace comes in. We won't get there, but like that's what I'm talking about. It's like there is I think a majority, there is a high percentage of young people that I think lived through that I have personally experienced in my life of like looking at a pastor knowing that he lives like a heathen, but he'll condemn me to hell for, not being perfect. And that's the kind of thing of like, that's what I'm talking about. Of like, I have people that I confided in, mentors, religious leaders that have said some very awful things to me about my spiritual journey when I'm like, you are a very horrible human being, respectfully. and like, that's the hard part. It's like, I know that people in my age bracket have left the church because of that, where they're like, if you want to read this book and say all these wonderful things about Jesus, and then not live, and then not do anything, and like just be the epitome of hypocritical, then what's the point?
We can all point to
of course,
religious leaders failing to live the life that they preach.
Right.
That's been going on a long time. I don't know how you stop that, because the church has always had sinful people. It will always have sinful people.
I think there's a threshold.
I think there's something deeper though going on than just kind of the typical. And believe me, I've heard it. Yeah, he's hypocritical. I don't want to follow. I don't want. Well, but what does that got to do with you?
You kind of have to look at the dates and the numbers for that, because there's a very specific time where it just starts falling completely off. Protestant and Catholic weekly attendance dropped off from about 50% in 1990 to 36% in 2010, the early 2010s. And then it really started to drop off. Weekly attendance fell from that 36% in 2014 to 26% in 2020. Monthly attendance declined, with 33% of adults attending monthly in 2019 to 30% in 2022. And now the percentage of Americans who report never attending church services grew from 11% in 1990 to 27% in the late 2010s. So if you're looking at about the same time when Ian talks about this 2008, when he realizes something changed, this number has taken a huge dive at that same time. And we even talked about that in the last episode, that might be the beginning of the fourth turn.
Well, I feel like
the crisis era.
It also, I think it involves community. I think in that same time period where we have cell phones, where we have social media, we're establishing this new what is known in the world as the third place. There's this digital third place that people will reside at. And I think that community has been on the downturn from that time. But I think that's
I agree with that.
To kind of answer your question. Yes, there always has been religious leaders, but I think more so is the addition of loving someone through that, and also establishing a community for people, I think is the part that I think is missing. There is a lot of shame, there's a lot of finger pointing, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of all this stuff, but there's no loving and community to help bring you through some of that. To yes, you can be taught, you can be told these are wrong. And again, even though as a pastor, I'm not saying I am, but a pastor could stand up there and say hey, this is how you live your life. I fall short all the time. But then still looking at your community of people and saying, but I'm going to love you through all that, and we're going to work on being better people together in a community together. But there's that lack of that I've experienced, where it's it just comes as I'm holier than thou, and listen to what I have to say, the kind of thing. That's what I'm saying. That at least from the people I've talked to, from some of my friends, that's not been something that is
I find it I found this article here which I thought was pretty good. It's called "America's Becoming Less Religious. Is Politics to Blame?" And it was about a 5-minute read.
Yeah.
They really bring up some good points. I thought that really strike at the heart of really why people are not going to church anymore, and the place of religion in their lives, which is something that's a kind of a different thing. Where does religion fit on the priority of when you wake up in the morning till you go to bed at night? And this is something that I found I thought was pretty good. And this is, you would look at this and go, well, this is a good thing, because the opposite you don't necessarily want, but yet it produced such. Economic prosperity and functional governance, both wonderful things, can weaken our felt need for religious resources. For example, much of religious institutions historically provided American citizens education, counseling, support for the needy, marriage options, entertainment, and explanations for how the world works. Are increasingly provided by the state and the market now. Church participation has become more optional. Just one more activity middle-class families do in the suburbs or not. And I have perfect examples of that with sports. Kids in sports. How many prioritize the kid going we need to bring them to the softball practice or soccer or football, and we'll get to church when we get to it. It's a mindset. Is where does religion fall in your life? I thought that point really hits at, I think, a great reason why religion has fallen away now versus in the past.
And you see, that was an area I wanted to get into with the erosion of intergenerational transmission of religion. It's less likely to be passed down within families today. And to validate hopefully what you said, studies show that fewer parents emphasize religious upbringing, and children raised in non-religious households rarely adopt a faith later in life.
Right.
And so we're finding other things to do with our kids. And, Pew data reveals that 31% of children raised Christian no longer identify with the faith by the age of 30.
Yeah.
I remember going to church with my parents and my grandparents and sitting on the same pew, taking the whole pew up on Sunday morning. Right. And that was the Hughes pew.
That's it.
And that's what we did. And you don't do that
anymore.
Was part
like of your social identity.
Now it's tournament baseball. Now it's tournament volleyball. Now it's, we're going fishing. We're going to the camp this weekend instead of going to church.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Church is optional now.
It's an option.
That's where, and I'm going to tell you, the statistics show when it comes to the transmission of the faith to the next generation, it's the father and not the mother that determines that.
Okay.
You would think it would be just the opposite, but it doesn't. What is the biggest predictor of whether children will continue the faith that they grew up in is where it stood with their father.
Really?
If the father viewed it as optional or it was just simply an obligation and not a means of reaching the divine.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I could see that. I like that.
That is because I hear a lot of times, well, we took our kids to church every day and all of a sudden, now they don't want to go to church and all that. And I'm thinking, was there any love there?
Mm-hmm.
Was there any explanation of why we're going to church?
Right.
Was it something that you just a rigid thing? I can understand as children, there's certain rules you gotta, when you're raising kids, it's a little different. But as a kid gets older, it needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
Discussions need to happen. This is why we believe what we believe.
Right.
But
this
like
is the reason why we do this.
And see, I remember
this is not just to check the box.
We would go to church. Then as a family, we would go to Don's Seafood. And we would fellowship together. And we would hang out together. And our grandparents could talk to us and ask us. And I had the frog legs. I always got the frog legs at Don's Seafood. I remember that. And it was love. It was time to spend together. But
it's also community. That's the big thing. That's the number one thing that I think that even today that I think churches are falling short on. Well, I say some, not all. Some are doing a great job at it. That more than anything else, this needs to be like a community of people that can also come together. This is it is a place of love. It is a place of getting better. It is a place of sanctuary. That's all it needs to that's a big thing as to have programs, have people in place that can help make that community thing happen.
And it's funny. I asked what were the top reasons for this. And number one was family as the foundation for social stability.
Yeah, which been under attack.
What's been going under attack. Impact of religious decline on community and values. Just what Ian is talking about. And then to go into what you said, connection between faith and mental health. Faith has offer psychological benefits, including a sense of purpose, reduced stress, and resilience in the face of hardship. Okay, then here's mine. Breakdown of family and its social costs. Loss of trust in institutions and authority. I mean, socioeconomic factors also play a role. We always, like you said, we look to the church for the answers. And now, what's the most dangerous sentence on the planet? I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Well, the government.
Okay, now the government does everything for you. You have no need or desire to go to the church for the things that you need.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that can be bad, and that can be very problematic for people that, if the government adopts policies that are completely contrary to the tenets of your faith, then that's where the problems come in with okay, how you navigate this. So, I mean,
and is this intentional?
Well, and it could be.
And if you look at it, if you look at the thing that we were talking about in the pre-show with Kamala Harris at her rally, when the man yells out, Jesus is Lord, and she said, you're at the wrong rally. But then also that same area is throwing buzzwords like Christian nationalism out there and making it so supposedly unpleasant for you to be a Christian because you believe in America, your rights are God-given, not government-given.
But
And
to
so-
also be devil's advocate too, there like that's also the problem I think with religion too, is that more than anything else, the radical crazy side gets all the publicity. So even in my own life, like I mean, there's been moments where like I am a Christian, and then there's the discussion of like, or I can tell that people are trying to feel out how far on the spectrum I am. You know what I mean? Like how crazy are you? Because there is, I'm not saying it's always, but like there is that sort of thing where it's like the reason why that buzzword exists is because there is probably a minority of people that is the squeakiest wheel that is like causing a bunch of commotion. That's like, you know, I don't believe that way, but there are people out there that do, and they're
that
very
don't
vocal.
believe what way? That our rights in America
No.
come from God?
I'm talking about like.
No, I'm asking.
I know. I'm talking about like radical. Just like there's radical left, there's also radical right. Where we're talking about some really hardcore stuff and like some pretty,
the thing about it, what I would say to that, and I've heard the term radical this or radical that. Mm-hmm. This is where I guess I have a problem, because the way we define radical changes.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it.
Yeah. I agree with that.
What people believed 35 years ago, when I was a kid growing up, now that's considered radical.
Oh, you drank out of a water hose?
And that's the problem.
That's not what I'm talking about, but I get you. I get you.
Just take that, though, with religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. What is probably the biggest driving force right now that is causing a wedge in religious communities?
Abortion.
Not abortion. What's the other one? What's the latest denominations have split up and separated because of a particular topic?
The woke agenda?
LGBT matters.
LGBTQ.
Well, that's the woke agenda.
Well, I don't know. I don't consider that woke. I consider that a completely separate deal. So my question is, that's what I'm saying. When I was growing up, that was just understood. The idea of a man and a man being married, a woman and a woman being married, and to even try to equate that to something as what marriage has always been, a man and a woman. The problem is that view is now coined radical, whereas before it was not radical. That's where I think the issue comes in, and that also ties into what we talked about last week with how different generations view certain topics. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, in the terms of Christianity, that particular topic has driven a lot of young people away from churches, and they're beginning to be identified as nuns because they leave a particular denomination because it says this.
When you're using the term nun, you mean like there is no religious
right? I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm just kind of a nun.
Yeah.
And unfortunately that number is rising quite rapidly. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, I think by 2070, based upon current projections, the nuns will be the majority.
I don't think we'll last that long.
Well, I don't know, but I'm just saying is when I hear the term radical left, radical right, what exactly do you mean by radical? It just depends on where we're at this particular time.
Right. Mm-hmm. But I'm referring to like in this context, what is considered radical? There is like a agreed upon normal conversation level of stuff, and then there's like this far side that like talks about the matters, but of course is over exaggerating or is just on the fringe of what we're all talking about here in the middle. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about. From like once you start tiptoeing far over into these two different camps, you start to see the almost like disassociation from everything else, and it's like this whole separation of like. So yes, I think it changes with time, and I think that those radical extensions change as well. But it's like whenever we're all talking amongst ourselves, and we're all like, I can view the left side, I can view the right side, but there are these portions of either side that are like I can't even cross over. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because I've had some conversations with people on that far left or right side that are like, they won't hear anything else except for what's in their own world, and it's like it's separate from everything else. And so, anyways, that's just
I mean, well, I would venture to say that's kind of what drives the wedge between what people consider themselves conservatives or consider themselves liberals.
Right.
You know, liberals are always going to push against the established norms. That's just what it is.
And then
how politics and how people work.
In this conversation as well, I think a overwhelming majority is this gradient of a middle. I really think there is just this minority on either side that is and that's what I'm talking about. And it's in every group. It's even in religious circles. You're talking about disaffiliation, same thing. You have this wide middle section, and these two sides are trying their best to like pull everybody and make it feel like it's 50-50 when it's not. I think that politics are the same way. I think that people reside in this spectrum of a middle ground of like a normal functioning human being, but there are these two sides that are so polar opposite that I think that it draws people towards them. But I think that realistically, I don't think that number is huge,
you know,
Well, you know, Ronald Reagan said it best though. We're one generation away from losing all of our freedoms, and right now, if we have another 4 years like we just had, that little group that Ian's talking about over here on the far left is going to destroy America. There won't be anything left.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. There are consequences to electing certain people. I mean, we all understand that. I mean, that's a given. If this side wins, then they're going to push their values and what they consider to be right. If the other side wins, then, you know, it's just the other way around. So, I mean, I think it's...
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're looking at this deep issue of why are people less religious today? What's driving and let's be honest, is there a crisis of faith that really?
I think there is, and I keep coming back to Ian and his 2008 statement. He felt something changed drastically in 2008,
but not religiously.
Overall,
you're right,
everything you said,
there
was a big shift.
It all connects.
That's exactly where I'm going with this.
Whether we want to admit that or not,
that's what I'm going with
connects.
this. All of this connects to that feeling. That may not have been him specifically, but every time I'm researching last week when we did the fourth turning, or I'm researching all of this, it all comes back to right after 2000, between 2005 and 2010, this huge shift of everything, including religion, including politics, including everything.
Well, this kind of ties in, and it's really, if we go back, I mean, when did kind of religion really get interjected into the U.S. politics? It was probably about the time
the
of
60s and 70s.
Well, and I would say about the election of Reagan.
Yeah,
when see
that was the other swing. That was the pendulum in the
Right.
60s and 70s. We're losing religion. Then around Reagan, we picked it back up again, and now we're on the pendulum. Now, thanks to the Biden crime family, that we're losing it the other way.
This particular, kind of following with this same article that I pulled up here. It says, for the past few decades, sociologists and political scientists have demonstrated across multiple studies that as Christianity has become increasingly aligned with right-wing conservatism and the Republican Party, Americans who might otherwise identify as Christians on surveys are now identifying as nothing in particular or none. The conclusion many seem to be drawing is this: if this is what it means to be religious, count me out.
This is what I'm talking about. When you have people, and I'm not going to name any names, but you have like political parties that claim to be Christian, when you have religious leaders that claim to be Christian, and they do some like very awful stuff, and they say some very terrible things, it again, whether you like it or not, that is like that is representation in some way. And so that's where I think that like smaller communities, churches, I think that's where they like need to be careful with some of that stuff, especially political stuff. Of like, I don't think that politics need to be in church. I think that you're going to church for a reason, and we're going there to go worship Jesus, in my personal opinion. And I think that people get really involved with what all that other stuff means, and it's like you don't need to talk about that here. We don't need to worry about that here. I understand in like the grand scheme of things, but like we're talking about like, let's go preach a sermon. I don't think it needs to be politically charged. I think it needs to be.
Right. It says this is particularly the case among young people.
Right.
Who often hold left-leaning political views. In their award-winning book, Secular Surge, Notre Dame political scientist David E. Campbell and his co-authors used experiments to show that when young Americans who leaned toward the Democratic Party were shown examples of politicians making Christian nationalist statements or pastors endorsing conservative political candidates, those young people were more likely to disaffiliate from religion. Mm-hmm. They literally changed their religious identity to nothing. This seems to be happening on a larger scale around the country. So,
there are some great churches out there that are creating a really strong sense of community and are loving people where they are in their life and are creating safe places for them and their family and opportunities to give back to their community. And I mean, like trying their best and doing their part to change their little slice of the world. And I'm all for that. I want to get behind things like that. I want to get behind churches that want to impact their community. They want to give back to their community. They want to like love people in and through all that stuff. But there are a lot of churches, I think, that put a bad taste in people's mouths like that are that of course cause this whole split and this whole frustration of it all.
And this, I just want to follow up because I think this is I believe this statement here. It says, studies are showing political conservatives are increasingly like to identify with religion, often because of what it implies politically. Mm-hmm. For example, political analyst Gregory Smith at the Pew Research Center found that between 2016 and 2020, more white Americans began to identify with the label white evangelical. But when he explored who started identifying this way, it was almost exclusively Trump supporters. Mm-hmm. In other words, more white Americans were being drawn to identify as white evangelical, not because of a born-again religious conversion, but because the label itself has evolved to mean something like pro-Trump, traditional family values, conservative. Yeah. And I have said this all along.
Yep.
We have made politics religion.
Yep.
Yes.
We have.
Yeah.
The energy that once was put into religion, for whatever reason, people abandoned religion.
Yeah.
And they made politics their religion. So if I don't put my energy here, I'm putting it over here. And so politics became the new religion.
And you're right. And all I'm trying to say is that there are people that may lean more liberal that I think are not finding their place in churches.
Exactly.
Which is unfortunate because I think everyone should be involved, at least in Christianity. I'm speaking from a American Christian mindset. I think everyone is welcome to church, whether you're black, white, whatever nationality you are, whatever you're like, whoever you are, that you are welcome in church. That's like rule number one of Jesus, of like love everyone. And I think that's what I'm talking about. There are people that I know right now, people that I know very dearly that are like, I probably won't ever go to church again because of the way I got hurt by the people. But I know, and again, they probably say like, I I'm agnostic. I believe there's some sort of higher power. All that they're putting it as none as their religious belief. But I feel like deep down, if they had someone that could just truly love them and let them be a part of a community, I think that would change. And I think that's something that we're missing. Is it's getting very political, we're getting very divisive, and again, it's either
we're devolving into our tribes.
That's what I'm saying. And so I feel like there's a lot of churches that I feel like have this Republican or this certain belief system.
You really find that in the evangelical churches.
You're right.
You do. They're
just
heavy.
All I'm trying to say is that there is a mentor and a religious leader that I've known for a long time, and he has said that if you are not uncomfortable with some of the people that you're sitting next to in church, we're not doing something right. And I was like, at first, I didn't like that, and I kind of pushed back because I was like, I don't know about that. But the more I started to see a community grow and be involved in some things, and there were some people that I think had some different beliefs than I did, or were raised differently, or were just come from a different spot in their life and their world. But I realized they're just good people, and they're trying to be a part of a good community, and they are trying to do good, and they are generous and loving and wonderful people. And I had to get over my own rubs and my frictions and what I believe. And I was like, I think that's right. I think that the church is welcome to everyone, and you're not going to agree with everyone, and sometimes people are going to rub you the wrong way, and that's okay. But I think you still need to love them.
And see that once again though, there's the fine line is we're called to love people, and we are. The fact of the matter is though, there are many on what we would consider the left, and the things that they're pushing, that they want to make law, which in essence is affecting everybody, often runs so contrary to what they profess to be a part of. And I think that's where inherently is the problem. How do you thread that needle, so to speak?
Right.
How do you thread the needle? Now, some people would say, well, let's take the abortion question. Okay. Right. There are probably very many people that are would we be considered pro-choice,
right,
that are not necessarily want to see abortions happen. But they agree that it's going to happen, and if it's going to happen, we want it to be safe and legal.
Right.
Okay? The problem is now that's no longer what the other side wants, because it's like, okay, once you give a little, it just keeps getting pushed. And now you got people that literally want abortion all the way up to the 9th trimester, to a fully formed baby. They're okay with partial birth abortion. That's so different.
You're right.
From when Bill Clinton said it should be safe, legal, and rare.
Right.
It's no longer even that anymore. It's just whatever.
Right. But I still think that there is this wide middle that I still think that I can have conversations with those people in a community I'm a part of, that we can differ, and I still don't think it's even that radical. What I'm trying to say is that, like, I still think that people still may swing in this spectrum of like this kind of gray area of like, I am such and such, I am pro-choice or whatever in this context. But then you start to like dig a little deeper, and I think that people will be like, I'm comfortable up until this point. And then, but I think that there, like you're saying, that there's this radical side that keeps pushing that I don't think is the majority of people. Well, but maybe I'm wrong. But I wouldn't be surprised if
I mean, I can look at people complain about the right. They want to impose. I sometimes get on discussions on chats with people that post on something on Facebook or Nextdoor or something along those lines. And I got in a conversation with this lady that thought, well, if Trump gets elected, we're going to have a theocracy. And I'm sitting there going, Trump probably half-heartedly cares about a religion. Let's be honest about that. Right. He's never, in essence, lived the way a lot of people they're going to vote for him consider what a Christian should be.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it's just what it is. It doesn't necessarily mean he's not a flawed human being like we all are.
Yeah.
You know, it's you have to kind of at the end of the day figure out, okay, who's the better choice?
Yeah.
And what policies I can live with, and which ones that are just completely crazy. You know, so I mean, I don't. Once again, is what has happened to us as people that we have lost faith. What's going on at the individual level?
I think
how many people that are Christians today?
Mm-hmm.
There right now Christians around the world that are being killed for their faith.
I think in this modern age, and this probably ties into what you're talking about, Stoney, about the whole change in 2005, 2008 situation of, I think that we, how do you word this? There's a lot more pessimism in the world.
We're a lot more narcissistic and
you're right.
cynicism.
Right,
definitely
I'm talking about in the lack of optimism. There are a lot of people that are no longer in church for whatever reason it is, but that lack hope and that lack this kind of, again, we are inundated day in and day out with social media, with news, with all kind of stuff, with religion, with political divisiveness, and the world's going to hell, and there's wars in the other side of the world, and every tragedy that's going on in the world is at your fingertips. And I think that has, not overnight, but over the course of probably 15 years or so, I think has changed people. And I think that there is this depressive atmosphere, this, like I said, pessimistic, just like this no hope for the future, like this. I'm not saying it's overall, but I just think a majority of people are lacking this like optimistic, like everything's going to be all right, because of like either they don't know the whole.
Where is the church growing right now in the world?
I think Africa.
Exactly. Africa and Asia.
Yep.
Guess what is driving that? And this kind of goes back to what I said earlier. We live a life of luxury.
Mm-hmm.
We are victims of our own success in this country.
Yep.
And in the West. America trails Europe by about 50 years. For all intents and purposes, Christianity is dead in Europe. It's dead.
But I is it though?
Yes.
Because I don't.
Yes.
I've heard recently that it's changing.
It's there's a lot of factors that have gone into it, but it's just the churches are empty. Now I will say that I know from a Catholic side, probably one of the biggest things I hear about was the child sex abuse scandal that broke out in Boston. And then that just opened up Pandora's box. And for a lot of people, it just completely soured them on it goes back to the failures of religious leaders to live the life and to be a beacon of hope for people. And which, as a Catholic, angered me to no end, that how they allowed this to go on, to even give these people a second chance. They should have been defrocked the minute these allegations were brought up and been done with, and then let the law deal with them as a pedophile. And so I do know in Europe, like for example, I saw a stat like in Poland, which is very much a traditional Catholic country. And if I can find the statistics on it, but I think it dropped from like 46% to like 25% of people that are practicing Catholics over there anymore. I knew a girl from Poland that left Poland, and she lives here in America now. I used to work with her some years back. I believe they've moved to another state now, but she told me of why she left the Catholic Church. It's because of how over there your taxes go toward the church. There's a percentage of your taxes go to the church. And I've always said, what is the reason why religion in America seems to have a little bit more sticking power? Is because it is really optional. You can kind of bounce around and kind of do what you want, and kind of the fickle nature of human beings to begin with. One minute I feel like this, another minute I feel like that. I mean, it's just we're fickle people, and we just are. And so it allows people to kind of explore different things, whereas I think in Europe it's a little bit more grounded in the traditional faith, and how that faith was practiced on a day-to-day basis, how it intersected with your life from birth to death, and so it's interesting how it's about 50 years. We're 50 years behind Europe here in America. But, I mean, just some stats I pulled here. I think it said 2045, Christians are no longer the majority. 2055, non-affiliate would be the largest group. And by 2070, 52% of Americans would be unaffiliated with any religious tradition. So they would be those nuns. I believe in God, and I'm going to try to be a good Christian, but I don't really subscribe to this or that or whatever the case may be.
Right.
Because when you subscribe to a denomination, you're subscribing to the beliefs that denomination says.
Right.
In their faith statement. As a Catholic, I believe what the Catholic Church proclaims. For people who are Baptists, they probably profess what the Baptist Church considers their core, whatever it might be, or Methodist or Presbyterians. We have a major problem with this issue, because I believe, unfortunately, what is the fastest growing religion right now in the world? Muslims. I mean, they already almost make up 10% of Europe.
Well, in 1990, they were 12.4% of the world population, and by 2050, they're saying nearly 30% of the world population.
They're going to be nearly neck and neck with Christians in the world. And you talk about a religious belief system that is completely radical to what the Western mind would believe.
Right.
Because they believe in absolute submission to Allah.
Right.
That's what it means to be a Muslim. And I often wonder how many Christians in today's world would be willing to sacrifice themselves for their faith.
Not a lot.
Exactly.
Well, because they don't have. I don't think they have a strong connection to it.
My question is, why don't you have a strong connection?
Well, because of all the reasons I think we just stated. I think they've been hurt. I think they feel ostracized. They feel like they're not a part of a community. They don't feel. I mean, like it doesn't. Like you're saying, it's all optional now, where there's no need to intersect if they don't need to.
There's a global attack on it.
I think there's also. I mean, it doesn't help that I think schools and things schedule things on Sundays now. Like you're saying, sporting events and certain like practices where like a lot of families are like, if my kid wants to play sports, which they love to do, and it makes them feel like they're part of a community they love, we can't go to church on a Sunday morning because of practice or whatever, which I think is
what do you think is the most churched city in America?
I'd imagine somewhere on the East Coast. I don't know though.
Yeah, the city with the highest amount of its population that attends some sort of religious service.
Detroit.
Nope.
I don't know.
Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Get out.
Yep.
Like I said, I thought
6 in 10 residents attend some sort of religious service. And you know what is the most unchurched city in America is?
New York City.
Somewhere on the West Coast.
Somewhere on the West Coast.
Yeah.
What you think?
I'm going to say somewhere probably around Los Angeles, I think.
Close. San Francisco.
Right, there you go.
It's around the Bay Area. The most unchurched
Yeah.
city in America.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yep. So, believe it or not, after Chattanooga, Salt Lake City is the most churched.
Uh-oh. Is that Mormon
They're both
territory?
at 59%. And then after that, Augusta, Georgia. And then my list gets all screwed up.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, fourth on the list, Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Get out.
Okay.
Wow.
Then
okay.
Birmingham, Anniston, Tuscaloosa. Then Jackson, Paducah, Kentucky, Montgomery, Greenville, and South Bend.
It's interesting.
Indiana.
A lot of times on lists, Louisiana always gets put to the bottom of lists for whatever it is, safety reasons or happiness scales or all that stuff. It's always on the bottom of the list. Murder rate, yeah.
The most unchurched cities, the 10 most unchurched, of course, was San Francisco.
Yeah.
Next is Reno, Nevada.
Hmm.
Then Springfield, Massachusetts.
Really? Wow.
Then Boston. Then Las Vegas. Portland.
Wow.
That's Portland, Maine.
Okay, never mind.
Then Chico, Redding, California.
Mm-hmm.
Then Seattle, Tacoma. Then Orlando, Daytona Beach, Melbourne, Florida.
Oh, wow.
And then Albany, New York.
Wow.
Hmm.
Interesting. It's a big spread.
Yeah.
It's not clustered in one area.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, some of this is just very. You know what gives me hope? That I do believe that there are a lot of people that are waiting.
That's what I'm saying. I think there's a lot of people in this kind of I'm saying this kind of I say this middle ground that I think probably believe some of what we would consider left beliefs, but they're also, I think they're good people that I do think still believe in Christianity and some things, and I feel like they just need to find their place. And that's the hard part, is I don't think that a lot of churches make a place for some people in that camp that,
Here's another question. The biggest decline in the importance of a religion emerges from what group?
Say that one more time, sorry.
The biggest decline in the importance of religion emerges from what group?
And what is the group in this like generational group, or do you mean like
generational, whatever? What do you think?
I don't know.
Probably millennial or Gen X.
You would think, but it's not. Senior Americans.
Get out. Really?
It went from 33% to 16%.
Of people in like
that
senior age.
consider the importance of religion.
Wow.
Followed by age group 50 to 61. 31% to 17%. 30 to 49, 26% to 14%. And then guess who's the best one? It's group under 30.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's not that many of them yet.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, but I think it's also the importance of religion. I think we've talked about this as well. I do think there are younger people that I think there are people, my parents and people in my generation, I think, have experienced the stepping away of church and living without it for a handful of years and realizing that like maybe there is some good things about it. I think that's if there's one takeaway I think from this episode is that me as the millennial generation, I do still feel like there is importance in it. I do still feel like I have conversations with people in my age bracket that are on that line of like I want to, but there's religious connotations. There are people there that I feel like I have been ostracized because of certain belief systems I have or certain things that I agree with. And I'm like, but they do still have that. They believe that faith or that God more than anything else is an importance in their life. Mm-hmm. And I think that the younger people, even in like Gen Z and so on, I think are experiencing some of that as well. Of like, there is some good things to come out of it, but.
Well, I mean, the kind of I kind of mentioned this earlier about the kind of the merging of politics and religion. Yeah. Part of this here, it says in for example, in Putin's Russia, according to Pew Research, the percentage of Russians who identify with the Russian Orthodoxy has grown. But closer scrutiny shows that resurgence doesn't reflect a rise in religious practices like church attendance and prayer.
Right.
But instead, nationalistic fervor. So that's what I'm saying. You've seen religion.
That's what you get with the state-run religion too. So
it concerns me, and I have never been a fan of a church leader getting up and endorsing political leaders.
Right.
I think because I have never I've been going to Catholic Mass all my life.
Right.
And I'm a regular churchgoer. So I go to the holy days of obligation and I go on Sundays. And sometimes I just go during the week.
Right.
But not once, not one time have I ever seen a Catholic priest get up at the pulpit and endorse a candidate.
Right.
Ever. Not once.
Which is the way
and I'm 55 years old
which
now.
Is the way I think it should be.
I have been going to church for that long, and not one time did I ever hear a pastor talk about that.
Right. And the same thing.
Now, you need to, what I would venture to say is how it's taught in my experience is this is what the church teaches. Use that to form your conscience and vote appropriately. And that's the way it should be.
If we voted our conscience, we wouldn't be in the problems that we're having today. It's when we don't vote our conscience and we start voting for these other things that we think we're going to do or get away with that we run into the problems that we're in today. If people just voted their conscience, Kamala Harris wouldn't be even running right now.
Well, I don't know if maybe not. I don't know that. I mean, because at the same time, and that's what I'm saying, this is kind of where it gets complicated. You need to vote your conscience. You need to look at if you truly subscribe to what your church teaches you.
Exactly what I just said.
If you truly do, then the question is, okay, well, then what are we doing for the poor? Right. What are we doing for all these other things that also require, but see, once again, this is where you got to be careful because Christianity was born in an idea of what within a pagan society. Okay, right? Christianity was born in a pagan society, and it radically was different than what the state provided. That's where it came from. It was radically, and what drew people to it? How did the church grow? What do we say all the time? How did the church grow from those earliest times? It was the blood of the martyrs that provided the fertilizer for Christianity to grow. It didn't for anything else. Other people were looking at these people that were willing to go to their deaths in often gruesome fashion, and they were joyful. What has Christianity turned into in today's world? It's become optional. It's become feel good. There is really no social consequence.
Well, it's become the latest motivational speaker who can get the biggest group of people together now. It's all about motivation, and it's not about sacrifice. It's not about people doing for other people. It's people with their hand out, and what's it going to do for me?
It had nothing to do, and I'm sorry if I'm stepping on toes
Step
for
on
our
some
listeners.
toes.
It's not about feeling good.
That's right.
Christianity was never about self-affirming, was never about any of that. It often meant my life was going to suck. It was going to be hard. I was going to get rejected by this world. That's what it meant to be a Christian. It's now turned into something completely different. It is a lot of self-help, self-motivation, prosperity gospels. I was listening to this guy talk the other day about, oh, God wants me to be rich and all this. What was this guy's name?
See, this is what I'm talking about as well. Of like that's what I'm talking about. Is that there is this radical other side. Or I say radical. I probably shouldn't use that term, but there's this other side where it's like those people can amass large groups of people, make them feel good, and of course claim that it's Christianity. And then whenever the rubber meets the road, people start to realize like, oh, I don't want to be that.
Well, it's hard.
I know, but that's
it's hard.
That's what I'm saying. Is that I think that. Gosh, well, I can't even get into it right now. But like,
it's hard. No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I really do. Trust me. I understand that.
It's people like that give. I think you were talking about you attend your Catholic masses. You haven't heard a pastor or a priest or whomever endorse a political candidate. I'm in the same boat. I surround myself with, or I'm part of a community that I feel like I'm in the same boat where like the political leanings isn't part of the sermon or who they're going to.
Right.
I've never experienced that because but know that there is a lot of pastors that do that. There is a lot of non-denominational churches out there that don't have any source of. They claim to have a source of like chain of command and authority and what is it called? Whenever accountability. They claim to have accountability, but realistically they don't. And I've seen a couple of those churches as well, where when you start to really dig down deep, it's like you're just a guy up here preaching to a crowd of people,
right?
And then when like we said, whenever the rubber meets the road, and your faith is tested, that's where it starts to falter. But
yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. Christianity has turned into a business.
Yeah,
for many people.
Yeah, and
look, I don't know the state of their heart. Know, I really don't. I don't. They're fallen people just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. But there's a part of me that just sits back and go, well, is that really what is kind of meant to be? Jesus talks a lot about, taking up your cross mm-hmm. and follow me, which indicates difficulty, mm-hmm. which means that things are not going to be easy at all. And, matter of fact, I not to get too heavily into religion, but this last Sunday at church, the gospel was about, James and John were confronting mm-hmm. Jesus about sitting at his right and sitting at his left. Mm-hmm. And what did Jesus tell him? He goes, let me pull you to the side. Let me tell you, do you really know what you're asking for? Mm-hmm. That, the Son of Man came to serve, right? Not to be served. He goes, are you willing to reject what conventionally man thinks of what that means? And they said, well, yes, we are. He goes, okay, then you will drink the same cup I drink. And guess what? 10 out of the 11 apostles, they all died martyrs' deaths. Mm-hmm. They did. Every one of them, except John, who died in exile. So this idea that we have become, I hate to say it, we have become soft. We don't need God. If we really want to get right down to it, for many people, I don't really need God because I've got everything else I need. Mm-hmm. I've got a nice home. I've got a nice car. I've got a job.
I hear you, and I think it's more so that they think that they don't.
Well, that's the illusion.
No, you're right, and but
the illusion.
There comes this point, like I was saying, with this lack of hope, this lack of optimism, this There are a lot of people, I think, going through a lot of stuff right now, and they feel like they don't. I have seen a number of people that I think have experienced the fact that there is something out there that they need. But
I think the biggest crisis right now is the LGBT stuff. I really do. I mean, the statistics showing that. How we managed to get through this, I don't know, because I don't know what churches are supposed to do when you've got churches that are, in essence, affirming these type of relationships as normal and as sanctioned by God as a traditional man and a woman. And I don't know how churches are going to navigate this, because believe me, even within my own Catholic church, right now there was a schism brewing in Germany with the German bishops wanting to outright bless homosexual marriages. And there's been a pushback. And guess where the pushback's coming from? The bishops in Africa and Asia. Western Europe is lost in many ways on this. And I'm telling you, that right now, you look at the statistics, what is driving young people away? I see it all the time. Well, I don't agree with my church's view on LGBTQ. It is. And this is what I'm saying. This at one time was not a radical teaching. This was normal. Why is it all of a sudden normal? Why is it now radical to believe the other way? What happened? What happened to our world?
Well, the world got smaller, like I told you. Like there's a moment where everyone's struggles all became our struggles at the push of a button.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, as I said, I don't have the answers for it.
Yeah.
I just think to talk about these issues, to bring them out there, this is what the statistics are showing. We all have to kind of look at ourselves and go, what's going on here? And as I said, as we talked about last week with the fourth turning, I believe we are in a crisis and something will come out on the other end.
Oh, yeah.
Something will come out.
Now, what is it?
We don't know yet.
Yeah.
This has been fun.
I have hope. I have optimism that something's going to work out, but who knows?
Yeah.
With that being said, thank you so much for listening. We have all of our different social media links and places where you can find us as per usual. You can type in Retrospect Pod on most places and find ways to get involved and listen to us or communicate with us. Also have our email, getdefinitedtogether@gmail.com, where you can send us some responses or questions as well.
And our website.
And our website as well.
Retrospectpodcast.com.
There you go.
This isn't just about family dinners or Sunday church services. This is about the very soul of America, our identity, our strength, and our future. Social media and individualism are telling our kids that they don't need faith or family, but we all know better. If we don't take a stand now, if we don't let this generational weakness continue, the freedoms that we hold dear could disappear. America's enemies know this, and they are counting on us falling apart from the inside. But we're not done yet, not by a long shot. The question is, what kind of nation are we going to hand down to our children? It's time to make the right choice.
And until next week, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. God bless.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. You're the best. Peace.